When billionaire Ethan Cole opened the wedding invitation from his ex-fiancée, he expected a sting of nostalgia, maybe even regret. What he didn't expect was to bring a janitor as his date, or that the man would turn the entire ceremony into the most shocking, heart-stopping, and unforgettable day of everyone's lives. Ethan Cole sat alone in his penthouse office, the Boston skyline glittering beneath him like a field of frozen stars. The invitation lay on his desk, thick cream paper with gold embossed lettering, the kind you could smell the price of before even touching it. Claire Bennett requests the pleasure of your company. The words blurred for a moment as he read them again, slower this time, as if repetition might change the fact that she was marrying someone else. He'd known it was coming. He'd seen her name appear in society columns beside Nathan Hale's. Young banking heir, picture-perfect smile, the kind of man who always looked like he'd just stepped out of a yacht catalog. Still, the RSVP line at the bottom felt like a cruel little dare. Plus one welcome. A polite invitation for him to showcase some equally polished beauty at her big day. Ethan leaned back, exhaling through his nose. He had no shortage of women who would be thrilled to be photographed on his arm. Models, socialites, investors who loved playing at romance when the champagne flowed. But none of them felt right. None of them would make this bearable. It was late. Too late for anyone to still be in the building. But as he stood to grab his coat, he saw a man down the hall emptying a wastebasket into a rolling bin. The janitor was wiry, mid-50s maybe, moving with the quiet focus of someone who didn't expect to be noticed. "Hey!" Ethan called. His voice echoed off the marble. The man turned, startled. "Evening, sir. What's your name?" "Sam Reed," he said, hesitating slightly, as if unsure whether he was in trouble. Ethan studied him for a moment. There was nothing calculated in Sam's face. No mask, no performance, just a kind of tired dignity that made him look older and younger all at once. "You busy this Saturday?" Ethan asked. Sam frowned. "I've got my shifts, but I can swap one if I have to." "Why?" "I've got a wedding to attend," Ethan said. "I need someone to come with me." The man blinked, clearly thinking he'd misheard. "You want me to work at it?" "No," Ethan said, his mouth quirking in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I want you to be my guest." Sam's hands tightened on the trash bin handle. "Mr. Cole, I'm not—" "It's Ethan, and you're not anything except invited." There was a long pause, the quiet hum of the floor's air system filling the space between them. Finally Sam nodded once, like a man making peace with a strange turn of fate. Ethan didn't know why he'd asked. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the subtle, unshakable pull of curiosity. But as he watched Sam wheel the bin away, he had the uneasy feeling that he'd just made a decision that would change far more than one awkward afternoon. Sam almost didn't show up the next morning. The whole thing felt absurd. One minute he was scrubbing coffee stains out of a carpet on the 32nd floor. The next he was agreeing to be the +1 of a man whose watch probably cost more than Sam's entire apartment. He'd spent half the night staring at the ceiling, wondering if Ethan Cole was playing some rich man's joke, or if Sam was walking straight into the most awkward afternoon of his life. But when he thought about the look in Ethan's eyes, direct, almost impatient, but not unkind, he decided to take the risk. Maybe it was the same instinct that had pushed him through harder times before. Maybe it was because his daughter, Maya, had been talking about dreams again lately. College applications, the art classes she wanted to take, the surgery she still needed on her heart valve. The bills were piling up faster than he could mop them away. When Ethan's assistant called later that day to confirm, Sam tried to explain that he didn't own anything wedding appropriate. The woman simply told him, in a brisk but warm tone, "Don't worry, Mr. Cole will take care of it." That evening, a tailor showed up at his apartment door with a garment bag, and the quiet efficiency of someone who had dressed 100 men who'd never worn a suit in their lives. Saturday came faster than Sam expected. A black town car waited outside his building. Inside, Ethan sat in a perfectly cut charcoal suit, scrolling through his phone like the rest of the world was on hold for him. When Sam climbed in, Ethan looked up briefly, assessing. "Looks good," he said, and there was no trace of mockery in it, just a simple statement, like he was talking about a job well done. As the city slid past the windows, Sam rested his hands on his knees, trying not to fidget. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it felt loaded, like Ethan was turning something over in his mind. Then Ethan nodded toward the small case Sam had brought. "What's in there?" Sam glanced down at the worn leather box. "Harmonica," he said. "Haven't played much lately. Used to do little jazz sets after work, back when I had the time." "You any good?" Ethan asked, without looking away from him. Sam smiled faintly. "My daughter thinks so. She likes this old tune, Autumn Leaves. Says it makes her feel like fall isn't dying, just breathing." For the first time, Ethan's expression shifted. Just a flicker, but something softened in his gaze. "That's a good way to put it." They didn't talk much after that. The rest of the ride was quiet except for the low hum of the engine, but Sam felt like something had shifted. He didn't know why Ethan had invited him, or what this day would bring, but he had the strange sense that his presence wasn't some accident. Ethan, for his part, kept glancing at Sam out of the corner of his eye, as if studying a puzzle piece he hadn't expected to fit anywhere. Somewhere between the penthouse and the wedding, the invitation in his pocket stopped feeling like a weapon, and started feeling like a key. The Lafayette Hotel loomed ahead like something out of an old film. White columns, marble steps, a row of vintage lanterns glowing warmly against the crisp afternoon air. As the car pulled up, Sam adjusted his cufflinks for the 5th time, feeling the weight of eyes that weren't even on him yet. Ethan stepped out first, the sort of man who looked like he belonged anywhere, and extended a hand toward Sam without ceremony. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lilies and expensive champagne. Guests in tuxedos and jewel-toned dresses milled about, their conversations a blend of polite laughter and the low hum of anticipation. Somewhere off to the right, a live jazz trio drifted through a soft melody that sounded almost like a warm-up, each note rolling lazily into the next. Then she appeared, Claire Bennett, radiant in an ivory satin gown that caught the light every time she moved. Her veil was simple, but it framed her face in a way that made her look both regal and heartbreakingly familiar. Ethan's steps faltered just slightly, so slightly that only Sam, walking beside him, seemed to notice. Claire was laughing at something her maid of honor had said when her eyes swept across the room and landed on them. For a heartbeat, her gaze locked on Ethan, and the laughter stilled. Then her eyes shifted to Sam. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Her smile faltered, her breath caught, and a flicker of something unreadable passed over her expression. Recognition? Surprise? It was gone almost as quickly as it came, replaced by the graceful composure expected of a bride. Nathan Hale stood beside her, every inch the polished air, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark suit fitted to perfection. He shook hands with a pair of older guests before leaning down to murmur something to Claire. She nodded, but her eyes drifted back to Sam for just a second more, like a thread tugged between them. Sam felt a strange discomfort, as though he had walked into the wrong photograph. He didn't know this woman, had never met her, but the way she looked at him left a faint echo in his chest. He glanced at Ethan, but Ethan's attention was fixed elsewhere. On the bar, on the waitstaff, anywhere but the bride. A server passed with a tray of champagne flutes, and Ethan plucked two, handing one to Sam. "Keep your head up," he murmured, almost as an afterthought. "Half the game is letting them wonder who you are." Sam tried to take that advice, but the image of Claire's startled eyes stayed with him as they moved deeper into the glittering crowd. Somewhere in the swirl of conversation and music, he felt it. Something was beginning to shift beneath the polished surface of this wedding, and he wasn't sure if he had just stepped into it, or if he was the reason. The ceremony hadn't started yet, But the grand ballroom was already thick with the kind of energy Sam had only ever felt at major events, like the air itself knew something important was about to happen. Rows of white chairs faced an archway draped in roses, soft candlelight flickering along the aisle. The jazz trio had moved from the lobby to a small platform near the front, their instruments glowing under the golden light. They began to play Autumn Leaves. It was slow, lingering, each note curling in the air before fading into the next. Sam froze halfway to his seat. The sound pulled at him the way a scent can drag you into a memory you didn't know you'd kept. His fingers twitched toward the worn harmonica in his jacket pocket. He hadn't planned to touch it today, but the urge was sudden and irresistible. He slid it out, cradling it in his palm for a moment before lifting it to his lips. At first, he played quietly, just enough for the notes to weave themselves under the jazz trio's melody, an uninvited but gentle guest at the table. The harmonica's voice was rawer than the polished saxophone, carrying a kind of unfiltered emotion that made the hair on his arms stand up. Halfway through the song, Sam noticed movement at the front of the room. Claire had stopped speaking with the cluster of guests and was looking toward the music. She didn't see Ethan. She saw him. Her eyes softened, her lips parting in a way that looked dangerously close to tears. Then a voice at his elbow startled him. You play that?" Sam turned to see a lanky teenager, maybe 16 or 17, with a mop of brown hair and a slightly nervous smile. "Yeah," Sam said, lowering the harmonica. "Little bit." "I'm Luke," the boy said. "I'm Claire's brother." Sam shook his hand, still trying to place why the kid looked so familiar. Luke's eyes darted to the harmonica again. "That song, you like it?" "My daughter loves it," Sam said. "She says it's like autumn isn't dying, just breathing." Luke's smile faltered. "That's exactly what was written on a note I got once, a few years ago. It came with a record, this song, while I was in the hospital, after my bone marrow transplant. The sender only signed it SR. Sam's chest went tight. "You had a transplant?" Luke nodded. "Yeah. They told me the donor was a man in his 40s or 50s, but they wouldn't tell me anything else. Rules, you know. I've always wondered who he was." For a long moment Sam couldn't speak. His throat felt dry, and the harmonica in his hand suddenly seemed heavier. The noise of the room faded, replaced by the faint memory of fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, and the weight of signing his name on a consent form years ago. Luke tilted his head. "You okay?" Sam managed a small smile, though it felt fragile. "Yeah, kid, I'm okay." But inside, he knew something had just shifted, like the universe had folded two distant points together in the middle of a wedding. Neither of them was supposed to change. The guests were finally seated, the soft hum of conversation fading as the music slowed. Claire and Nathan stood beneath the rose-draped archway, hands clasped, bathed in warm light. The officiant, a calm-voiced man in his 60s, spoke with the practiced rhythm of someone who had joined dozens of couples in vows. Ethan sat near the aisle with Sam beside him, eyes fixed forward, but clearly elsewhere. It was all proceeding like a perfectly rehearsed play until the officiant reached that timeless pause. "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." For a heartbeat there was only silence. Then Claire's voice broke it. "I do." A ripple of shock moved through the room. Nathan's head snapped toward her. "Claire!" She didn't look at him. Her gaze found Sam in the crowd. "3 years ago," she began, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent that made it impossible to look away. "My brother Luke was dying. We were told he needed a bone marrow transplant immediately. A match was found, an anonymous donor. That man saved my brother's life. We were never allowed to know his name, but I always wanted to thank him." Her eyes were wet now, but she didn't blink. "A few minutes ago I heard a song, Autumn Leaves. The same song that came with a record sent to Luke after his surgery. Inside was a note. It said, "When it gets scary, listen. Autumn breathes too." It was signed S.R. She took a breath, her voice trembling just slightly. "Sam Reed, was that you?" The air in the room seemed to thin. Sam swallowed. His hands knotted in his lap. "I didn't I mean, yes. I was the donor." Claire's lips pressed together, the corners curling upward in something between relief and disbelief. "Why didn't you ever come forward?" "Wasn't about me," Sam said quietly. "I just matched, and I could help. That's all that mattered." Somewhere in the crowd a guest sniffled. The sound felt louder than it should have in the silence. Nathan straightened, his jaw tight. "Claire, this isn't the time." "No," she said, turning to him now. "This is exactly the time. We're standing here, making promises about love and loyalty, but you weren't there for Luke. Not once. You said hospitals made you uncomfortable. You said the smell of antiseptic gave you headaches. But a man who didn't know us gave my brother a chance to live." Nathan's face hardened, but he said nothing. Claire looked back to Sam, her voice softening. "You were a stranger. You could have walked away. You didn't. I can't stand here and pretend that doesn't mean something." A murmur moved through the guests, growing into hesitant applause from somewhere in the back. Then others joined in. It wasn't raucous or chaotic. It was the sound of people acknowledging that something real had just surfaced in a room built for performance. Ethan glanced sideways at Sam, his expression unreadable. Sam kept his eyes on the floor, wishing he could disappear and yet knowing this moment was far too big to hide from. What had started as an unexpected invitation had just torn open the heart of a wedding, and there was no going back to the way the day was supposed to go. Nathan's face was pale, his jaw set so tightly the muscles trembled. For a moment it looked as though he might argue, might try to wrestle the ceremony back into the script they'd all been handed. But instead, he stepped back from the archway, pulled the boutonniere from his lapel, and set it on the nearest chair. Without a word, he walked down the aisle and out through the side doors, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The murmurs in the room swelled, then quieted again, everyone uncertain whether to sit, stand, or leave. Claire remained where she was, her bouquet resting against her side. She didn't look broken or embarrassed. If anything, she seemed lighter, as if she'd been carrying a weight she hadn't realized until she'd put it down. Her eyes found Ethan in the second row. He rose, buttoned his jacket, and stepped forward. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said, his voice steady, and carrying easily through the room without the need for a microphone. "I once made the mistake of choosing a business deal over the person I loved. I thought there would be time later. There wasn't. Today I watched someone else choose to show up when it mattered most, without expectation or reward. That's the kind of choice that makes us human." He looked at Sam, and for the first time since they'd met, there was no trace of detachment in Ethan's gaze, only respect. "Sam, you reminded me what that looks like." Claire stepped toward them, the hem of her gown whispering across the aisle. "Ethan," she said softly, "I don't need saving. I never did, but right now we have someone else who does." She glanced at Sam, and the meaning was clear. Sam shifted uncomfortably under the sudden attention. My daughter Maya needs surgery. It's expensive. I'm doing what I can, double shifts, odd jobs, but it's slow. That's not why I came here, and I don't want pity." Ethan moved closer, lowering his voice so only Sam and Claire could hear. "Tell me the date. Tell me the cost." That's not right," Sam said quickly, shaking his head. "I'm not here with my hand out. This isn't—" "This is exactly the moment," Claire interrupted gently. "The truth is that wealth, like blood, should move to where it's needed. Otherwise it just sits there, useless." Ethan's jaw tightened, and then he nodded once. "Consider it done." Sam blinked at him. "You don't even know how much—" "Doesn't matter," Ethan said. "You showed up for a stranger. Let someone show up for you." Around them, the guests were still seated, watching the strange tableau unfolding at the front of the room. No one seemed to know if the event was over or simply transforming into something else entirely. Sam felt the heat of their stares, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like the whole room had shifted to hold this one fragile, impossible moment where three lives intersected, not in a boardroom or a hospital or a wedding aisle, but in a place where the only currency was what you were willing to give. 18 days later, the morning sun poured through the tall windows of Boston Children's Hospital, scattering light across polished floors and the gentle chaos of nurses changing shifts. In a private room on the 5th floor, Maya Reed lay propped against a stack of pillows, her dark hair tied back, her eyes still heavy from the anesthesia, but brighter than Sam had seen them in months. The faint beep of the heart monitor kept time with the quiet rhythm of her breathing. The surgery had been a success. The valve was repaired, the danger, at least for now, pushed back where it belonged. The bills had been handled without a single form arriving in Sam's mailbox, though he knew exactly whose signature had moved that miracle forward. Ethan had kept his word, creating a fund in less than 24 hours after the wedding. Claire had named it without hesitation, Autumn Lives. Sam sat in a chair by the bed, his old harmonica balanced across his knees. He played softly, just enough for Maya to hum along when she felt like it. Autumn Leaves, again, her favorite. She'd once told him the melody felt like walking through a season that refused to die. Now, as he watched her fingers tap against the blanket in time with the music, he thought maybe she'd been right all along. Ethan arrived mid-morning with 2 coffees and a bag of pastries from a bakery Sam could never pronounce. He didn't come in like a benefactor checking on an investment. He came in like someone who wanted to sit for a while, someone who had learned the value of showing up. Sam noticed he didn't just greet Maya, he also nodded to the nurse by name, asking about her shift and whether she'd gotten a break. Luke visited often too, always bringing his textbooks, sometimes pretending to study but mostly telling stories that made Maya laugh even when it hurt. He'd taken to calling his scar a badge, and he showed it to her like a promise that recovery could be more than just surviving. Claire came with him sometimes, though she never stayed long. She and Ethan didn't circle back into romance, she'd made that clear. But there was no bitterness in it, just an understanding that their paths were crossing for a purpose other than the one they'd once imagined. When the day finally came for Maya to be discharged, she insisted on giving something to both Ethan and Claire. She handed Ethan a bright yellow sticker that read, "Don't get distracted," pressing it onto the back of his phone before he could protest. For Claire, she dug into her bag and produced a smaller sticker, a red leaf, placing it on the worn leather of Sam's harmonica case. "So you remember to play louder," she said. Sam didn't say much on the drive home, but as he watched his daughter doze in the back seat, her face peaceful, he realized something had shifted. The fear that had been pressing down on him for years had loosened, and in its place was something he'd nearly forgotten how to carry: hope. Spring came early that year, as if the city had decided it was done with the gray weight of winter. The first benefit concert for Autumn Lives was held in a converted warehouse by the harbor, the kind of place where exposed brick met chandeliers, and music curled through the air like it belonged there all along. The stage was modest, but the room was full. Donors in tailored suits, families whose lives had been touched by the foundation, doctors in their weekend clothes, and a handful of people who'd just come for the music. Sam stood in the wings, a harmonica in one hand and a folded set list in the other. His name wasn't printed on the program as a headliner, but when the local jazz quartet finished their set, the host announced him like a man worth listening to. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was warm, expectant. He stepped onto the stage feeling that familiar tightness in his chest, the weight of eyes on him. But this time there was no shame in it. He glanced toward the front row, where Maya sat between Ethan and Luke, her hair loose over her shoulders, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Claire was near the back, clipboard in hand, making sure volunteers had enough bottled water and that the silent auction tables stayed organized. Sam lifted the harmonica, and the first notes of Autumn Leaves floated into the room. The quartet joined in halfway through, but the melody stayed his. It wasn't polished or flawless. Some notes bent under his breath, others carried a rough edge, but every sound felt alive. By the time he reached the last bar, the audience was on their feet. As the applause swelled, Sam caught sight of a woman making her way toward the stage. She wore a plain blouse and a medical ID badge clipped to her pocket. Her eyes shone with the look of someone who'd been holding back words for years. When she reached him, she extended a hand. "I was the coordinator for your donation," she said, "the one that saved Luke. I wasn't supposed to tell you, but the rules have changed. If both parties agree, they can meet. There's another family. You saved a woman in Albany." She named her daughter Autumn. For a moment Sam just stood there, harmonica still in his hand, the applause fading into a muffled hum in his ears. Then he laughed, not loud, but light, like a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I'd like to meet them," he said. Ethan joined him on stage then. No microphone, just a hand on Sam's shoulder. The two men stood together under the warm stage lights, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Behind them, the Autumn Lives banner hung across the brick wall, bold letters framed by a spray of red and gold leaves. In that moment the air felt the way Sam imagined the season itself might feel, brisk, alive, and full of motion. Autumn was breathing, and for the first time in a long time, he was breathing with it. What I love most about this story is that its resolution doesn't hinge on romance, revenge, or the tidy restoration of the past. It's about the unexpected intersections that rewrite our lives in ways we couldn't have scripted if we tried. Ethan begins as a man defined by loss and material power, and ends not by winning Claire back, but by rediscovering what it means to show up for another human being without a transaction attached. Sam starts as a background figure in the grand architecture of someone else's life, yet he becomes the quiet axis around which everything turns. Proof that one unselfish act can echo for years, rippling far beyond the person it first touched. The shock at the wedding isn't a scandal to be whispered about. It's the revelation that sometimes the person who truly belongs in the spotlight is the one who never sought it, and that the most profound victories often have nothing to do with who walks away with the bouquet, and everything to do with who leaves knowing they've made someone else's life possible. It's a happy ending, yes, but it's not neat. It leaves space for real life to keep unfolding, for Maya's future, for the new family in Albany, for the hundreds more who might one day be helped by Autumn Lives. The final image, Autumn breathing, and Sam breathing with it, stays with me as a reminder that joy can arrive quietly, almost shyly, in the wake of hardship. And when it does, you don't have to cling to it to keep it. You just have to keep breathing along.